The Galapagos Islands, a beautiful archipelago revered for its biodiversity and fabled muse of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. Located 600 miles into the Pacific Ocean from Ecuador, its country of governance, and 3,000 miles from where our journey began. 5 flights, 2 buses, and a ferry later, we arrived in Puerto on the island of Santa Cruz. It's a clean port town with a vibrant malecón filled with shops, restaurants, and friendly people. But we were excited to get out of town. At the end of the trail, we emerged onto a beautiful white sand beach at Playa Brava. Here we spotted our first marine iguanas. They spend most of their time laying out in the sun, warming their bodies. But for about an hour each day, they brave the Pacific Ocean to feed on the algae that grows on the rocks below the sea. The next day, we went to the Charles Darwin Research Station, where we took a tour with a bilingual guide who informed us about the native plants and animals and the research that they were doing to protect them. The main attraction at the research station is the giant tortoise. They have a breeding program through which they are repopulating the islands with giant tortoise, and the visitors can see several species at different life stages kept in separate pens. Back at the docks, it was time for us to catch the ferry to Isabela Island. The ferry proved to be a surprisingly small and stuffy powerboat packed full of soon-to-be seasick travelers for the 3-hour, 50-mile crossing to Puerto Villamil. Isla Isabela has no direct flights from the mainland, so it takes an extra leg of travel to get here, and it shows in the smaller, slower-paced town of Puerto Villamil. We rented bikes for the week to get around, which worked out perfect because there were lots of free self-guided activities on Isabela. We walked the boardwalk through the salt pools on the west end of town, where we spotted black-necked stilts, marine iguanas, and flamingos. On the other end of town is Concha de Perla, a well-protected snorkel spot amongst the mangroves, and we were excited to get in the water. About 2 kilometers west of town, the public is allowed to enter a section of the national park without a guide. We continued down the road with our bikes for another 2.5 kilometers while dodging giant tortoise, and did a couple of short hikes along the way. Highlights of this excursion were watching marine iguanas fight on the beach, and watching a giant tortoise chow down on some opuntia with no regard for the spines at all. Just down the beach from where we were staying was a little sandbar, offering up some uncrowded, easy waves. We also went on a few guided excursions on Isabela. The first was a boat tour of the Tintoreras, the small islets that form the bay of Puerto Villamil. And while walking through the lava rock islets, we saw groups of marine iguanas, with the dominant male in each group posturing to protect its females. Then we got to jump in the water for some snorkeling, and were greeted by a young, playful sea lion. The sea lion seemed to get jealous when we started paying attention to the sea turtle and drove it away. White-tip reef sharks congregated in the narrow cracks in the lava rock where they could rest in the relatively warm, protected water. We also did a kayaking snorkel tour of the Tintorettas Islets. We were really excited to see the penguins being active on our way back. The Galapagos penguins form a strong pair bond and remain with the same partner for their entire lives. These two were reuniting after one had gone out fishing. We also did a boat trip to Los Tuneles, a shallow cove full of lava arches. We got a good look at blue-footed boobies. The flat rock covered in guano is their version of a nest. Here we saw a juvenile booby in the process of molting. And we also got to do some snorkeling on the trip. At the end of our time on Isabela, we headed to the airport. We had decided to take the 45-minute flight to San Cristobal instead of spending 12 hours connecting ferries to get there. Only one person seemed to work at the airport. He sold us our tickets, checked in our luggage, and carried it all out to the tarmac, where I helped him load it onto the plane. The flight came with complimentary ear protection, and everyone got a window seat. We arrived in Puerto Moreno, a bustling town in a big bay with a long melicone, full of souvenir shops, restaurants, and sea lions. Lots and lots of sea lions, with lots of super cute pups. We hired a taxi to take us across the island to Puerto Chino. I had heard there might be some surfable waves here, but came up empty. Nonetheless, we had a nice time on the beach watching the wildlife. We stopped off in the lush green Highlands to have a look at Laguna El Junco, the only freshwater lake in the Galapagos. Our taxi driver proved to be a great guide and took us to his friend's ranch, with an awesome view of the west coast of San Cristobal. We went on what was commonly referred to as the 360 tour, which is an all-day boat trip that takes you all the way around the entire island of San Cristobal. Our first stop was Rosa Blanca. This beautiful spot had a very well-protected bay to snorkel in. Back on the boat, we continued around the north end of the island. Our final stop was Kicker Rock, a rock formation just off the coast of San Cristobal that rises nearly 500 feet above the ocean and drops to 130 feet below. There are a couple of hikes near town that can be accessed without a guide. The trail past Loberia was a bit rugged through the lava rock, but provided some nice wildlife. And on the north end of town, past the Interpretation Center, were some paved trails to a nice lookout. We also hiked out onto the military base looking for surf. I jumped in with a couple of local boys to ride what we could find, but the exposed rock made the wave a lot more challenging. We also did a self-guided snorkel at Muelle Tijeretas. We had a really neat interaction with some sea lions. One was swimming around with a rock, so I dove down and grabbed a similar looking rock and tossed it up. We ended up playing a little game of fetch. With our time in the Galapagos coming at an end, we felt fortunate to have experienced such a wild and beautiful place, so different from the home that we were flying back to.